Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express News Show. In this episode, we talk about a strike that brought Bengaluru to a standstill. We also talk about a female literacy program in Jharkhand. But first, we talk about the Indian football team's coach and his astrologer. Back in June 2022, the Indian national football team had faced Afghanistan in a crucial Asia Cup qualifying match in Kolkata. The match was pretty important for the Indian team, which at the time had been out of form and injury-ridden for quite some time. According to the Indian Express's Mihir Vasavda, nothing seemed to have been working out for the Indian team, both on and off the field.
Now, the period we are talking about is May and June 2022. It was a phase when nothing was going right in Indian football. On the field, the team was struggling to win. Off the field, the federation was engulfed in a lot of problems as well. There were corruption allegations, financial mismanagement, proper administrative mess. So in this backdrop, the Indian team was headed to play the Asian Cup qualifiers.
The federation Mihir refers to here is the All India Football Federation or AIFF. This is the national governing body of football in India. And at the time, the AIFF was particularly concerned about the fate of the Indian team. But the team ended up winning the Kolkata match and eventually qualifying for the prestigious Asia Cup Championship. This was when things started to change for them. Mihir tells us where things stand right now.
So they are actually going through one of their finest phases. The Indian football team is enjoying its great period. This year in 2023, they have lost just one match in regulation time. That's in the 90 minutes. They've lost a couple on penalties and stuff, but the actual result, it's been either a draw or win. So they've just lost once, which is quite incredible for an Indian football team. They've moved into the top 100 of world rankings. Just recently, 5 days ago, they gave Iraq, who are the former Asian champions and one of the finest teams in the continent, they gave them a run for their money. So yeah, it's going pretty well on the field at the moment.
But while the Indian team continues to excel on the field, a recent revelation has somewhat tainted its stellar turnaround. Turns out, the Indian team's coach, a former Croatian footballer named Igor Stimac, had selected the team for the match not based on skill or form, but instead based on the inputs of a Delhi-based astrologer named Bhupesh Sharma. According to Mihir, Igor and Bhupesh were first introduced by Kushal Das, the former Secretary General of the AIFF.
Kushal Das, the Secretary General of AIFF, told us that both he and Igor, they were worried about India's qualification chances. And it so happened that Kushal met the astrologer Bhupesh Sharma at one of the meetings he had gone to. And that's when the introduction between them took place. And then later on, Kushal introduced Bhupesh Sharma to Igor Stimac. And it was then agreed that for a couple of months, Bhupesh Sharma would be associated with the football team.
Sharma ended up signing a contract with the Indian team for a period of 2 months and was paid around 13 lakhs for his services. During that time, Stimac is believed to have sent nearly 100 messages to the astrologer, taking his inputs on major decisions, including team selections.
So before every match, a couple of days before every match, they used to discuss the team, the probable playing 11. And according to what we conclude from reviewing the messages, it comes across that Bhupesh Sharma would analyze the stars of the playing 11 and he would give his inputs to the coach who would then make a final call. Now, in certain cases, we found out that the final decision of the coach was in fact influenced by whatever Bhupesh Sharma used to say. So in one case, and this is just before the Asian Cup qualifiers, a week or two before that, India played a friendly match against Jordan. And before that match, Bhupesh Sharma said that one of the players, the attacking midfielder of the team, his stars weren't that great. So in reply, Igor asked him to compare, the stars with 3 other players, and Bhupesh Sharma then gave his preference in 1, 2, 3, 4. This player in question was ranked 3rd, and he did not make the playing 11. He started as a substitute, came on as a second half substitute. So that was one instance.
And it wasn't team selection alone. The coach discussed personal details of players without their consent, including their birth dates and times, substitution strategies, and even injuries. In this segment, we speak to Mihir in detail about Igor's relationship with his astrologer and what these revelations mean for the team. So, Mihir, just how unusual is a situation like this, where a coach is taking inputs from an astrologer before any big match?
Not really, I mean, as bizarre as it sounds, it's not the first time something like this has happened. At least one known instance before this was back, I think, during the 2006 World Cup or just before that, when the French team, and this is when the French football team was at its peak, they had won the World Cup in 98 and they were one of the favorites going into this World Cup as well. Their coach, Raymond Dominic, he dropped one of the finest players France has ever produced, Robert Pires, because Dominic apparently was Aquarius with Virgo and Pires was a Scorpio. And the coach thought that the guy in Scorpio worked against his interests. So even though Pires was one of the finest players the football has ever seen, he was dropped because of astrology.
Right. And Mihir, one would assume that a situation like this would raise certain issues for Indian football and for sports in the country, right?
Yeah, massive issues. I mean, we spoke to one of India's former defenders, one of India's former internationals, Gaurav Singh, and he highlighted the integrity issues involved in this because you're sharing information that is confidential, which is largely supposed to stay within the team management, and it was shared to someone from outside the group without explicit consent of the players or anyone involved. So this we're talking about, substitution strategies or injury issues and even the playing 11, which is discussed a lot before the match is supposed to begin. So integrity issues is one of the bigger problems that was highlighted and which comes to the fore through the messages exchanged.
And has there been a response from the AIFF or from Igor on the issue yet?
Right, so starting from the top, the president of the All India Football Federation back then was Praful Patel, and he just said that he was neither aware nor told about the issue. The next in line was Kushal Das as the Secretary General, and he admitted to having introduced Timak to Sharma in May 2022. He said that it was one of the reasons why he thought was because they were worried that whether India would qualify for the Asian Cup. And during his presentation, Bhupesh Sharma, the astrologer, said that he was associated with a few telecom companies and Bollywood personalities, and he thought that by astrological timings and current phase of the players, he can help motivate people into taking right decisions. So according to Kushal Das, that was one of the reasons why the astrologer was introduced to the coaching staff. We reached out to Stimak and he said that, I'll quote, Bhupesh was recommended to me and I was convinced, in brackets, by others that I have to check upon his possible effects in sports and no more than that. And then Stimak goes on to say that he was surprised and shocked to find out the size of Bhupesh's contract, especially because he had requested the services of another foreign assistant coach and that was not even considered. So that was from Stimak. We tried to reach out to Bhupesh Sharma. He didn't respond to our calls and messages, and the current administration of the All India Football Federation did not wish to comment on the issue.
And next we talk about Bengaluru. On Monday, the city came to a grinding halt when thousands of private buses and taxis went on strike in a bid to exert pressure on the government to meet their demands. Protesters from 32 private transport unions organized a march, with each union raising specific demands to the government. These demands included the launch of a government cab aggregator application as an alternative to Ola or Uber, and the banning of the bike-hailing app Rapido, among others. And what's striking is that by the end of the day, the government had agreed to most of their demands, leading to an immediate end to the strike. To know more about the issue, my colleague Utsa Sarmin speaks to the Indian Express's Kiran Parashar in this segment.
So Kiran, there were 32 demands raised by the private transport organizations which had called a strike on Monday. What among these were the main ones?
So Utsa, the Bengaluru strike was called by the Federation of Karnataka State Private Transport Association, which represents about 36 various unions, which are mostly into public transport, like private buses associations, taxi and goods vehicle association, auto rickshaw unions, and there are many other associations which are connected to this public mobility or public transport. So these people had several demands, like each one of the unions had its own demands. For example, when I say Auto Rickshaw Drivers and Owners Association, they had demanded government to provide them a 10,000 rupees monthly compensation for them, where they claimed that they are incurring loss because of Karnataka's Shakti scheme, which allows women to travel freely in government buses, in KSRTC and BMTC buses. So they had demanded for 10,000 rupees of monthly compensation. Meanwhile, the private bus operators who claimed they have been impacted by Shakti scheme because where it allows all the women to travel freely across the state. So they wanted the government to also include these private buses under the scheme so that they would also apply women for free, and they wanted government to reimburse with the amount. And also they wanted to reduce the road tax on tourist and contract carriages. And also they wanted to appoint a person in RTO office, road transport offices, who could handle the permits of these vehicles. So these were few of the demands.
Right, and can you tell us why the private buses raised an issue with the Shakti scheme?
So basically, if you see, Shakti scheme allows women to travel freely inside Karnataka for free. So this is one of the brainchilds of the Congress government, which they had mentioned in the manifesto. And it was one of the schemes which was also implemented once they came to power. Now, what it happens is there are several private buses or private bus operators in Karnataka who claims that they have lost a lot of customers from this, who are now traveling in government buses rather than the private buses. So, according to the Association of Private Bus Operators Association, it has put them into a huge loss, which is why now they are demanding that if the scheme can be extended to the private bus also, then the women will also board their buses. At the same time, they can also reimburse it from the government side. However, Chief Minister Siddaramaiah categorically denied that they cannot extend the scheme for private buses, because if it is done, the government will have to shell out more money again. So, which is why the Siddaramaiah categorically said that it would be impossible to extend Shakti scheme for private buses. So this was one of the demands of the Private Bus Operators Association, which was categorically turned down by Siddaramaiah-led Congress government in Karnataka.
Right, and Kiran, we understand that it took the Karnataka government only a day to agree to most of the demands. What made the government take such a quick decision?
Utsa, see, before this strike, these demands were doing rounds since June, July. And on July 24th, Transport Minister Ramlinga Reddy had held a meeting with all the association members, and a follow-up meeting was also held on 31st of July, where he had principally agreed to fulfill few demands, but nothing was executed. So even the associations had given a certain amount of time for the government, but there was no response. So on Monday, they went for the strike, where all the public vehicles like school vans, school buses, auto rickshaws and private buses, goods vehicles were stayed out of the road. So that put many of the public into hardship, because in Bengaluru you will require all these things. Though BMTC had added additional buses and additional trips, that was not sufficient. So by Monday afternoon, the government and the association, which held a meeting again, then came to a understanding that after the assurances of the government, and they withdrew the protest or the strike.
And do we see this having an impact on the Siddaramaiah-led Congress government?
So basically, opposition parties like BJP and JDS did not involve fully in the strike that was called by these associations. It was more of a strike that was carried out by the drivers and owners of the private buses. So for government, this is going to be a serious concern if at all these private bus owners continue their demand to include them under Shakti scheme. So as of now, government has denied that they will not be able to do so. But we will have to see how will they take it forward. At the same time, there are a lot of schemes which are already prevailing, which covers some of the portions of the demands where the drivers had put forth before the government. Whatever involves too much of finances may not be implemented, because given the situation that Karnataka now will have to invest more than 50,000 crore every year, spend 50,000 crore every year for the 5 guarantees that they had promised before the elections. So when it comes to policies or something that doesn't involve too much of finance, I think the government would go ahead and fulfill those demands. But Shakti scheme implementing to private buses and giving 10,000 rupees monthly compensation to auto rickshaw drivers, I don't think government has any interest in fulfilling those demands.
And in the end, we talk about a literacy program for women in Jharkhand. Last year, a district in Jharkhand started a female literacy program with an aim of teaching basic letters and numbers to 50,000 women. Now, currently, adult literacy is a major concern in this eastern state. When we spoke to the Indian Express's Abhishek Angad, he told us about the extent of this problem.
The data that we have is from the state literacy mission. According to that data, there are like more than 42 lakh people who are not literate. When we say not literate, it is basic numeracy and basic Hindi and identifying some of the key English words.
And among these 42 lakh people, Abhishek says that around 27 lakh women lack basic literacy skills. So to address this concern, as we mentioned earlier, the Dumka district in Jharkhand decided to start a female literacy enhancement program last year.
The then Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Ravi Shankar Shukla, had actually found out that there are a lot of women who don't have basic literacy. And his idea was that if we actually are able to educate in some sense to these women, then there will be a lot of cascading effect and there will be a social transformation. And also it will start as a movement, because if there are women who are educated in and know about their rights, so then they can also show their agency.
And for this, the district administration applied for a 1.6 crore rupee fund from Niti Aayog, which was later utilized for training teachers and initiating classes for adult women of Dumka. But the program encountered its fair share of challenges. And Abhishek says that one of the main problems was finding suitable teachers for it.
It was not an easy task because initially the district administration had planned that they will actually teach 50,000 women. But it was not possible only because they couldn't find the instructors, as in the ratio that they had planned was per instructor, the 30 women. So if you see like that, then that comes around 1,600 instructors, right? But after the first advertisement, they actually got through and only 600 odd instructors were found. These people also needed to be from the communities only because it makes a lasting impact. And also the administration had thought about the sustainability part of it. Even if, let's say, the deputy commissioner is transferred or the officials are not there, can the program be sustainable? So with an aim to make it more sustainable, the administration had gone to all 10 blocks of Dumka district. They had advertised about how there's this program where, only female would be taught on certain things, and that they're looking for certain teachers, and the qualifications are that they have to have a 10th pass and then, or they must be studying somewhere.
And when the district administration found around 600 women and provided them with training, they faced yet another challenge: the harassment of the teachers.
There was issues about how people view the first generation teacher in any household, a female teacher in a household, and how the society views as the woman who actually goes out of the way to teach other women. So there are a lot of harassment that some of the instructors actually faced in their own household or in their locality. Sometimes you used to ride a bicycle to reach a place because it was far. Then a lot of neighbors used to taunt and pass comments, and they used to come to their houses and comment. So it was very tough journey for a lot of instructors per se, because there was something new that was happening in a lot of areas.
Now, the problems were not only limited to the instructors. According to Abhishek, the district administration also had to overcome the challenge of finding women between the age group of 15 to 60 who would be interested in coming to study regularly.
The women were very skeptical at first that whether or not this is going to benefit them altogether. Does it make sense that they actually leave, let's say, some sort of harvesting of a rabi crop? And does it even make sense that they leave that and join a class? So will something happen or other? So it is an ecosystem that most of the women instructors build, right? So initially, during the survey, they had to convince them, तुम एक दो दिन आओ, देखो, मत करना कुछ, बस जस्ट काम, तुम बस बात करना वहां पे आकर के. So interestingly and very importantly, the women instructors, 10 of them whom I spoke to, they said that we never talk we never only spoke about the classes. It's an ecosystem that we built around, and we shared the sorrows and joys of life and what's actually ailing in their own houses, what's the problem that they are facing, and what are the sons, daughters doing. So one of the ways that to bring them to study to the classes were to actually rope in their sons and daughters and tell them कि आप भी उनको ले आओ, वो भी पढ़ेंगे बैठ के यहाँ पे. So if they really want their sons and daughters to study, so those 2 hours of study is taken care of there only at any raised platform or wherever they are studying, right? And if somebody is also talking about आप आइए वहां पर आपको सरकारी योजना का भी हम आपको बताएंगे कि कैसे कितना अच्छा सब चीज है. There was some sort of incentive always given to them to indirectly motivate them, to attract them to these classes. And once that started happening, slowly when the numbers started coming to a plateau, then the biggest challenge was how do you teach them? Because they have never held a slate or a piece of chalk in their hand.
And so the teachers had to come up with innovative methods of teaching these women. Here, Abhishek describes how some teachers used bamboo sticks or sand as their teaching tools to make the subjects more interesting and accessible.
How do you teach what is 3? I mean, how do you teach a person if they don't know what is 4? So the easiest way that some teachers thought was to do is to put it, to juxtapose it, to put it besides something which is actually 3 and which can be counted. So some of the teachers had actually gone and under the sun, they dug some sand and, they made balls and they colored it. And after that coloring that ball, they said, this is the number 3. So beside number 3, which they had painted in some sort of slate or somewhere, they put 3 colored balls. So to give them a picture of what 3 is or what 4 is or what 5 is. So slowly they started picking it up.
And in just 1 year, more than 8,000 women have benefited from the program. These are women who have not only learned basic numbers and letters, but have also gained the ability to assert their rights. Here, Abhishek tells us the story of a group of laborers who were initially denied payment for their work, but who ultimately finally got their rightful dues because of the program.
They actually used to travel 20 or 30 kilometers to a particular area and then they came back. And for the last 2 or 3 months, the contractor had not paid the money to them. And whenever they used to ask them, they used to tell them, "Achha, dekhenge, karenge." So some of the laborers who had taught the basic literacy and basic stuff, so they actually demanded their due payment. And because after that they start reading it, writing it, then there were a lot of talks about it. And then that's how they went to DC's Janta Darbar, and there they actually wrote an application. And then after writing that application, they said, okay, and then the DC immediately went to the labor superintendent. He directed the labor superintendent to look into the matter. And in the next 2 days, the amount were paid.
And Abhishek says that these women were not the only people whose lives changed because of the literacy program. The program also opened doors for the instructors who dedicated months to educating the women of Dumka.
Of the entire literacy program, I would say there are 2 beneficiaries. One, of course, the women who were being taught, and the other are the instructors who actually realize that, okay, we can also do certain things because somebody is a graduate or somebody was not a graduate and they couldn't really complete their graduation. But once they saw that their hard work is, bore fruit, they saw somebody completely illiterate signing their name or reading out their name, and there was a ray of hope that this thing that again got rekindled in their hearts, and they actually told their family members, we also want to study. And there's one example of Bailey Kumari, how she completed her graduation and she had actually dropped the second year and she got married to a man, and she actually moved from a town to a village. So there her family members were not very supportive of the idea that to continue the education. But after this entire program, what happened was then she was able to complete, and now she wishes to complete her master's degree and she was to study further.
Now that the program has successfully managed to train more than 8,000 women, the district administration is looking forward to expanding the reach of the program.
So the aim for the program is to make sure that 50,000 women become literate. So once that 50,000 mark is reached, so there are a lot of problems in any community. There are a lot of issues that happens. There are health problems. There are sanitation issues. There are a lot of issues about education. So the district administration has hoped that eventually it will lead to asserting their rights. Eventually, and of course, if you make a woman in any household literate, the entire household thinking and mentality tends to get a shape around something constructive. So the district administration had hoped really that once that 50,000 mark is reached, there will be a lot of progress in terms of how the basic entitlements or how several rights are being asserted and demanded from. So this will eventually have a propelling effect as a force multiplier to ask or to make sure that a lot of schemes gets implemented properly. It's a long haul, but this is what the initiative was.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was hosted by me, Rahel Philipose, and written and produced by Utsa Sarmin. It was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet at us at Express Podcasts or write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.